Superintendent Jack Johnson has been in charge of police operations. It's been a massive task. David Johnson spoke with him a short while ago.
Not quite finished for us yet. So far we're quite content with the result, of course, but unfortunately it's a very nasty event by whatever measure you apply to it.
But the operation from your point of view went well?
Oh yes, we've been able to resolve the issues quite satisfactorily.
Now, when you arrived at the scene here, I understand that you described the scene in the tea rooms as something like war.
I was very perturbed when I went into those facilities down there in the restaurant because whilst I haven't seen a war zone, that's what I've seen on the television and depicted in other arenas as being a war zone.
And some of the people were killed while they were sitting there eating?
And they appeared to have been taken completely by surprise, slumped over beside their meals.
Must have been a shocking scene for you.
It was quite horrific.
And what about your members? I mean, are they in shock now as well?
A lot of people have been very grossly affected by a number of the scenes of this particular incident, and we're going to great lengths to ensure that everybody is provided with as much support, debriefing and counselling as we can possibly provide.
Superintendent Jack Johnston. As residents of Port Arthur relive the massacre, some remarkable stories are emerging. They're tales of bloodshed and lucky escapes, and of astonishing acts of bravery.
With the dead outnumbering the survivors 2 to 1, there aren't many who can tell police exactly what happened at Port Arthur yesterday. Those who can have told of how they'll be haunted by their narrow escapes. Hobart woman Karen Jones said tourists thought the sound of gunfire was part of some historic reenactment at the infamous penal settlement.
It was just like a cannon going off. We thought it was all part of the show. We were going down to check out what was going on, you know. Thought it might have been a little bit of extra on the side, so like you get the tours around there, and we thought, well, they were letting off cannons. And
her boyfriend, Philip Milburn, says the shooting was not as random as initially reported.
I mean, if we walked past him and we went the other way and he went to the shop, I think, well, if he got out of the car and started shooting straight away, well, we might have been the first, maybe.
The shock of their encounter with the gunman was still setting in today as they recounted the panic of the scramble to safety.
A pregnant lady, Karen, she was there. She just couldn't stop vomiting. She was sort of panicky. There was an old guy upstairs. He'd lost his wife. He couldn't find her, but they found her downstairs.
He just, because he couldn't get downstairs, too many people, and everyone sort of passed the message on. They found her.
So there would have been people in there who may have lost loved ones, who didn't know what had happened to their loved ones.
Oh, easy.
Among the others facing danger, helicopter pilots, forced to fly through gunfire during the airlift of casualties.
Well, I was requested by the paramedic to fly as low as possible, which is not an unusual situation, as we normally get involved in that type of accident or in people with chest injuries. We are used to that, and sometimes, luckily yesterday the weather was not a problem, so we were able to comply with that request, and we came all the way below 1,000 feet.
At least 5 of the survivors who crossed the gunman's path are yet to tell their stories. They remain in a critical condition here at Royal Hobart Hospital, but doctors are confident they will pull through.
I mean, they're seriously ill. I mean, are being monitored constantly, and we are hopeful, you know, that over the next sort of 48 hours or so that their results will be good.
Of the 13 others wounded, 11 are described as satisfactory and 2 have been released.
We have a plan here which is called a Code Brown. It's an emergency plan that was put in action and in place in 45 minutes. The overall performance of all staff, from the medical staff to the catering staff, have been brilliant.
Hospital staff have been praised for the way they coped with the emergency, management denying rumours that some nurses refused to treat the gunman. Adam Walters, 7 Nightly News.
And ahead in this special edition of 7 Nightly News, live from Tasmania, Australia reacts to the horror of Port Arthur.
And calls from around the nation for a massive crackdown on gun ownership. Welcome back live to Port Arthur. While pictures of this rampage have gone live around the world, details of the killer remain sketchy. He's known to be intellectually handicapped, in his late 20s, and unlicensed to carry a gun, let alone a lethal automatic rifle.
I honestly thought that maybe half-jokingly we said we'll be lucky to get out of this one alive, and that's honestly what we thought. But in the back of your mind you say it as a joke, but there was meaning behind it, and apparently I was right.
A chilling encounter with an alleged mass murderer. Gary Sprigg will never forget the painting work he did on the alleged Tasmanian gunman's home last year.
And the things he was saying about me and the things that I could hear that were going on in the house, and I just knew things weren't right.
Could you hear the gunfire?
It was just like a cannon going off. We thought it was all part of the show.
Karen Jones and de facto husband Philip Milburn could have been the gunman's first victims. He arrived at Port Arthur as they prepared to tour the nearby ruins. They were just metres apart.
Do you think you were lucky?
Yep, I do.
Well, I mean, if we walked past him and we went the other way and he went to the shop, I think, well, if he got out of the car and started shooting straight away, well, we might have been the first, maybe.
So who is this man behind Australia's worst massacre? He lived in this quiet street. Neighbours unaware the man said to be either mentally unbalanced or schizophrenic was capable of murder.
I think maybe he was just a very quiet person that kept to himself, yeah.
You never seen him carrying weapons or anything?
No, I never seen anything like that, no.
Did you know that he had guns?
No, I didn't know that either, no. I didn't know he had guns.
So it must be a hell of a shock to you.
It is a shock, yeah, it is a shock.
Yeah.
Great shock.
And this is where the alleged killer lived, in this rambling two-storey house, largely hidden by overgrown vegetation, in a modest, middle-class suburb in northern Hobart. Neighbours remember the man as being quiet, a loner, seen sometimes walking his dogs. But others have told us they remember him quite differently.
Just that he'd talk about younger children, younger people in a way that a normal person wouldn't talk. Senses you just know, but just that it wasn't right.
The alleged killer remains in Hobart Hospital, but slowly a more detailed picture of the man and his motives is being drawn. For some, this nightmare will never go away.
I mean, yeah, there is a couple of things that happen down here, but you don't ever think it's going to be as bad as this.
And as details of the gunman emerge, there's a theory he was bent on revenge. Dean Felton has this report after he spoke to a friend of the killer.
Jodie Hodgett grew up in Port Arthur, knew the man who's now in custody for the killings, and even went horse riding with him. She describes him, even in his teenage years, as a social outcast, unable to mix and cared for mainly by his younger sister.
Definitely mentally disabled to a point where he was not very social.
Today she recalled that he often travelled with a surfboard strapped to the roof racks of his car, even though he didn't surf. And his general demeanour she described as like that of an 8-year-old boy.
I feel sad for his family. I feel sad on a whole that something wasn't done before he did this to us.
One of the gunman's victims was a girlfriend of Jodie's who still lived in Port Arthur.
There hasn't been a lot of names released as yet, but I do know some of the people that are dead.
Jodie's parents live and work in the immediate vicinity of the massacre, and she spent several anxious hours yesterday fearing her parents were among the victims.
I mean, had he have taken a different turn, he could have gone past my parents' house, or he could have gone up to where my father was working and taken hostages from there just as easily as he took hostages from the hotel.
Now Jodie is simply hoping no more of her friends are among the dead.